welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by a distinguished guest with a very interesting career who is here to discuss a very interesting book as well. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Sure, Jen. It's my pleasure. My name's Thomas Cullen, and I'm the author of Charlie Man.
Charlie Man is an absolutely beautiful book. It is so vivid in its depiction of the early 90s. It is a beautiful contribution to coming of age stories and it gives you a lot of food for thought. Before we talk about the book itself, I'd love if you could talk a little bit about what made you want to write a novel. Was it a particular character you wanted to explore, an event, a mood? Where did this project begin?
Sure. So I guess I'm best known as a lawyer, now judge, but my first love has always been writing. I started writing in college. I wrote op-eds and essays for a school newspaper. As a practicing lawyer, I regularly wrote op-eds on myriad topics from public policy to politics to legal issues. And then more recently, when I became a judge, I could no longer opine on current events and politics and those sorts of things. So I needed to find a new outlet. So I pivoted a little bit and started writing more innocuous general interest pieces. Like, for instance, I wrote an essay on fly fishing and one on the joys of attending summer camp. And after working on those, the idea kind of came to me that perhaps I ought to try to write a novel. I had the idea for one percolating in the back of my mind for several years, and for whatever reason, I had never sat down to attempt to write a couple of chapters and go from there. So one day I just decided I was going to give it a shot and see if I could get the story started. And as I got into it, I found that I was enjoying the process. And, I thought perhaps this isn't that bad and I'm going to see it through. And that's how it kind of came about.
Nice. I'd love to talk about crafting your protagonist, Charlie. I'm particularly interested in boundaries, let's say, between fiction and the places where you're drawing on your own experience, because I believe Charlie is about your age, had a not completely identical life, but similar in some ways. So can you talk about crafting a fictional character out of your own experiences and where you're true to your experience and where you sort of stretch things creatively?
Sure. So it is a novel, but it's often said that first novels are at least partially autobiographical. And I think that's true to a certain extent. Charlie, as the protagonist, is certainly familiar to the author, right? In terms of setting and time and place. I was about his age, circa 1994. I attended a private school similar to the one that Charlie attends in the book. And some of the experiences that Charlie has throughout the novel are similar to experiences I had, and some of the challenges he faced in the novel, anxiety, uh, dealing with relationships, both with a girlfriend and fraught relationship with a best friend, and dealing with the angst that goes along with college admissions and the pressure that puts on young people. So all of those experiences are familiar. Many of the characters are based, some more loosely than others, on folks that I encountered along the way, friends that I had, teachers and coaches. There are probably no dead ringers, including Charlie. A lot of the characters are composites, but certainly folks that I knew along the way and some of the experiences I had as a teenager at that time um, serve as inspiration for a lot of what's in the book.
In terms of filling out the supporting cast, these relationships that you're talking about, was there a character who was the toughest to crack in terms of getting inside their head and putting them on the page? And the flip side, was there one who was the easiest?
So Charlie was probably the easiest, right? I guess that almost goes without saying. Your protagonist, by and large, should probably be the easiest to craft. His best friend, Bo Miller, was probably the most challenging. I mean, I had a loose idea of what I wanted his character to portray and some of the qualities, both strengths and weaknesses. But I had to kind of guard myself and I had a tendency to you don't want to make him out to be that bad, right? I mean, he's still got positive qualities. He's still a kid, the same age as Charlie. Yeah, he has an easier time because he's a better athlete, he's a better student. He's considered more handsome than Charlie, but at the same time, he's still a kid and dealing with a lot of these same issues. So insofar as he's ever perceived or portrayed as a villain, I had to check myself and keep in mind that, he's still a teenager and there's a lot of good in Bo too.
Absolutely. And I imagine there's a lot of, your protagonist has to sort of understand the relationship as a teenager does, but you, the writer, is writing it as an adult who is looking back on sort of teen relationships. I'd love to know about what you did to get yourself into that mindset and about evoking the summer of 1994. I'm a little bit younger than Charlie. I was 11 that summer, and it was really even warm and nostalgic for me just to remember like a childhood before phones, before screens, and how it was easier in some ways, but also more complicated. You evoke that very effectively.
Well, I appreciate that. So that was one of the coolest parts of the project, right? To revisit that era of my life, this pre-modern time period when we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the internet, certainly no social media. We used landline telephones, we listened to CDs, had bootleg mixtapes, and we sat together on the banks of the James River and just talked for hours, right? Because there's really no alternative. You had um, to sit face to face with someone and have sometimes deep conversations about things. So that was neat, right? So these challenges that you alluded to, they're timeless, right? I mean, today being a teenager is as challenging, if not more challenging than it was for us 20, 30 years ago. Um, but these characters face many of the same challenges, but they did it at a time when perhaps it was, in some sense, a little easier to deal with things because your emotions and your relationship status and those sorts of things aren't broadcast real time to your network and beyond. So, in order to kind of capture the unique time, the unique place, I had to go back and think about the music and think about, for instance, with dialogue, how do I craft dialogue that is realistic? How would I have said something, right? Um, and to try to capture and communicate that particular voice and manner of speaking. I ended up having more fun writing the dialogue. I think that was the most fun aspect of the project. And for me, going into it, it was the most daunting. Having done a lot of writing as a lawyer and other pursuits, I hadn't written a lot of dialogue. So that was new to me, something I was worried about going in. And then when I got into it, you just kind of get lost in it. You become a part of the conversation, and it was just so much fun to reminisce and think about how you would have talked about that certain topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel like the language is very appropriate to like what I was hearing around me at the time, the music, all the pop culture. Um, And I think what you really capture is, I think adults also like to sometimes rib teens, for like, oh, you have it so easy, you don't have any real responsibilities, obligations, et cetera, et cetera. But you're also trying to figure out what you want to do with your whole life before you really know who you are. That's a great burden to put on somebody at a very vulnerable age.
It's a huge burden, and we haven't gotten any better about that, right?
Yeah.
For all the advances in society, kids have all this pressure put upon them to figure these things out at an early age, and I think we expect too much, and it takes its toll.
Mm. And that is like the sort of the universality of the stories that even though the tech may change, the way that we communicate and find each other in the world might be a little bit different, but the emotional struggles and this sort of those moments of life transition are very familiar, I think, regardless of when you grow up.
No question, timeless.
I'd love to talk a little bit about coming of age stories in general. I think I read somewhere that you have also described this as an homage to classic coming of age stories. What are your favorites? What are the stories that you feel like are in your writerly DNA?
So some of my, I guess my all-time favorite coming of age would be Catcher in the Rye. It was one of my favorite novels as a teenager, as a high school English student. Before I went to law school, I spent a year as an English teacher at a boarding school, and that was one of the books that I taught. So 5 times throughout the year, we would read Catcher in the Rye, and I would read it every time. So that was a huge influence on me. I was always a big Ernest Hemingway fan. The Sun Also Rises is probably one of my all-time favorite novels. Not a coming of age novel per se, but certainly a male protagonist who is college age, a little bit older, trying to figure out his place in the world and dealing with the same sorts of challenges. So that was another big influence. I have eclectic taste in books and in reading. I mean, I love fiction. I love all sorts of mass market fiction. Michael Connelly, Alan First, Pat Conroy, Nelson DeMille. I read a lot of biographies and nonfiction. So I think being a lifelong and avid reader, all of those influence you, unconsciously, subconsciously. And I'm sure I drew on experiences with those great books and trying to voice and capture a particular time and place.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, those books that you've mentioned do the same thing where they portray very specific lives, right? Like not many people grew up like the protagonist of Catcher in the Rye, but you can identify with the feelings that he's having, the sort of the period of his life that he is in, the thoughts and the feelings that maybe like you get embarrassed about later, when you're a grown up looking back on it. Do you think you'll write another novel? Do you think that this is something you'll return to?
So I would hope so. I enjoyed this much more than I thought I would. And when I was finished, there was a real sense of sadness. It was like, these characters you've really invested in and spent a lot of time with and developed, kind of leaving them behind. And it took me a little time to kind of get over the fact that I was no longer working on that project. That said, I have a day job and it's a pretty busy one, but I do think that down the road I would like to do this again. Whether it's more Charlie Man or something entirely different. I would bet that in some form or fashion I'll be back at it in the near future.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I would love to see more of his story or of really any story in this vein. Do you think that you'll continue writing for this sort of same age audience, or do you want to expand that as well into the, adult audience? Where do you think you'll go?
That's a great question. This is categorized, and I think accurately, as a young adult novel. I hope it appeals to a wider audience, right? Particularly people my age or even older. Um, that said, I think it's important. And I've read recently in the New York Times and other publications about the fact that young men, particularly teenage boys, are no longer interested in reading and in books for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think it's uncontroverted that many more women read than men. And people have surmised why that might be. And one of the theories is that particularly younger audiences, teenage boys, don't identify with the protagonists and some of the books that are out there, and there are fewer and fewer male, particularly YA authors. So perhaps there's a need, right, in that particular space. I enjoy being in that space. I find the characters are compelling. It's a precarious point of life, but it's also just a fun time and a fascinating time in your life, and there's a lot to work with. So all that is to say, I feel comfortable in the space. I don't want to pigeonhole, I'm always going to be YA. Maybe it's a YA with an asterisk that has broader appeal.
Nice. Yeah, I think YA represents a really nice sort of meeting of generations, because you're speaking from your own experience, but you're reaching out to like another age group. And I look forward to seeing what you do next, the sort of fiction space. Thank you for your time and for sharing this book with me. I think it's going to be a really popular one with our patrons.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Jen. It's my pleasure. I appreciate your interest, and maybe we come back sometime.
100%. All right, listeners, now it is your turn. You have some homework to do. Please check out Charlie Man. It is out now, currently, as we record. It will be out, continue to be out when you hear this. So please head to your favorite bookstore, library, website, wherever you like to go for book. Right, well, it is time to close this chapter. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.